laugh.
Oh, he did, completely so. I mean, we did a scene in that movie where my character Stu is at the table, the dinner table, chokes on his shrimp. It's a beautiful scene, and his character hates my character because I'm with his wife. We talked about that period of time. So go do it. If you got it, run with it.
He was the man who made the world believe in Bond again, the cool, elegant spy who could save the day with nothing more than a tuxedo and a smile. But behind that perfect image, Pierce Brosnan was living through battles no movie script could prepare him for. Fame never softened the pain he carried. Betrayals cut deep. Loss left scars that never healed. And there are 5 names he has never forgotten. 5 people whose choices, whether by fate or design, changed the course of his life forever. This isn't gossip. This isn't some Hollywood tell-all. This is personal. When Pierce first heard the whispers that Timothy Dalton had been cast as James Bond, it felt like someone had taken something out of his hands before he even had the chance to hold it. Dalton wasn't his enemy. In fact, they were friends, which made it worse. Back in the mid-80s, Pierce wasn't just a contender for Bond, he was the choice. Albert Cubby Broccoli himself had seen something in him, something magnetic. Even Ian Fleming's widow thought Pierce was the man her late husband had imagined when he wrote the novels. And Pierce believed it too. This wasn't just a role, it was destiny. He was starring in Remington Steele at the time, and when the show was cancelled in 1986, the path seemed clear. Finally, he could step into that tuxedo. The producers were ready. The timing was perfect. The stars were aligned. And then NBC, sensing a ratings opportunity from all the Bond buzz, reversed their decision. They revived the show, and Pierce was bound by contract. The role was gone. In an instant, his dream evaporated. Dalton stepped in, as he had every right to. He'd been on the short list for years, waiting for this chance. But for Pierce, watching a friend take the role he believed was his, it was soul-crushing. He smiled for the cameras. He played the good sport. But behind that smile was a man quietly breaking. And just as Dalton took over as Bond, Pierce's life was unraveling in ways no one could see. Cassandra, his beloved wife, was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. She was his anchor, the person who believed in him before the world did. Now she was sick, and his dream, the dream she had carried for him, was gone. Every time he saw Dalton as Bond, it was like a reminder of everything slipping away. Dalton wasn't the villain in this story, but he became the symbol of Pierce's pain. The years that followed became the lost years, as fans call them. Between 1986 and 1994, Pierce floated through roles that kept him visible but never satisfied. He played spies in films like The Fourth Protocol and appeared in sleek commercials that hinted at Bond's style without naming it. Bond had become a ghost haunting him. Dalton's tenure burned briefly, and eventually he stepped away from the role, but for years Pierce carried that weight. When the call finally came in 1994, when they finally offered him the part, the baggage hadn't disappeared. Even as GoldenEye premiered to massive success, making him the definitive Bond of a new generation, Dalton's shadow lingered not as a rival, but as a reminder. If losing Bond once was devastating, nothing compared to what came next. Christopher Brosnan wasn't just his adopted son. He was a second chance for Pierce to become the father he'd never had himself. When he married Cassandra in 1980, he became a stepfather to her 2 children, Charlotte and Christopher. And when their biological father passed away in 1986, Pierce made it official. He adopted them, gave them his name, and poured into them the love he'd been denied growing up. For a time, their family was whole. They were close, happy. Pierce would later say it wasn't about becoming a father, it was about becoming a family. But when Cassandra died in 1991 after a brutal fight with cancer, everything splintered. Christopher was just 19, and he didn't know how to cope with the loss. While Pierce buried himself in work, Christopher slipped away from him. He tried to stay close, working on Pierce's Bond films behind the scenes, but the cracks were showing. Arrests followed: drunk driving, then substance charges. The tabloids were merciless, reducing him to a headline, "Bond actor's junkie son." For Pierce, it was agony. He had already buried the woman he loved. He had already fought helplessly by her side while cancer stole her away piece by piece. Now he was watching his son fade too, this time from an illness no doctor could treat. Addiction is slow grief. Every relapse, every mugshot, every tabloid cover was another little funeral. Christopher didn't die. Not officially. He just disappeared year by year. By the time paparazzi caught him outside a London store in 2024, gaunt and unrecognizable, he was a ghost of the boy Pierce had raised. Pierce buried Cassandra. In 2013, he buried Charlotte, who died of the same cancer that had taken her mother. And though Christopher is technically still alive, Pierce knows he's lost him too. 3 of the people he loved most in this world, gone. He once confided to a friend, "Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the person you're trying to save doesn't want to be saved." He has never spoken publicly against Christopher, but his silence says everything. The pain is private, and it's permanent. And then came Daniel Craig. If Pierce had thought losing Bond to Dalton was painful, nothing could prepare him for what happened in 2004. After Die Another Day became the highest-grossing Bond film ever. He thought he was safe. He thought he was Bond for life. He was even training for the next movie when the phone call came. 47 seconds. That's all it took to erase a decade of loyalty. The voice on the other end said, "You were a great James Bond. Thank you very much. Goodbye." Behind the scenes, the decision had already been made. The producers wanted a younger Bond, someone grittier, someone who could reboot the franchise. While Pierce was still promoting Another Day, they were already testing actors in secret. Internal emails revealed they thought he was too old, too expensive, and, ironically, too perfect at being Bond. The very thing that had saved MGM from bankruptcy was now the reason they wanted him gone. There was no meeting, no handshake, no farewell dinner. Just a cold goodbye. The betrayal cut deep. Not because Daniel Craig wasn't talented, Pierce has spoken kindly of him, but because of the way it happened. It wasn't about being replaced, it was about being discarded. To spend years building something, carrying it on your shoulders, and then being tossed aside without ceremony, that was a wound that never healed. And through all of this, the dreams that slipped away, the betrayals, the unimaginable losses, Pierce carried himself with grace. The world saw the tuxedo, the charm, the perfect smile. What they didn't see was the man who endured tragedy after tragedy, who buried half his family, who turned pain into art. Behind every suave Bond quip was a man who had learned how to survive. Maybe that's why he's so beloved. Because when you look back, you realize that what made Pierce Brosnan's Bond unforgettable wasn't just his elegance or his wit. It was the shadow behind his eyes, the weight of a man who knew what it felt like to lose everything and still stand tall. It was just a call. No build-up, no explanation. Pierce was alone on location in the Bahamas when the phone rang, and in less than a minute, everything he had worked for was gone. "You were a great James Bond. Thank you very much. Goodbye." That was it. 47 seconds to end a decade of loyalty. No meeting. No handshake, no gratitude. Just silence. He later said he was utterly shocked, completely bewildered. He thought he was preparing for Bond 21. Instead, he was finished. And the man stepping into the tuxedo, Daniel Craig. Someone Pierce had never met, never even spoken to, who would come to represent everything that had been ripped away from him. When Casino Royale was announced, the backlash was immediate. Fans mocked the casting of a blonde, little-known actor, and Pierce stayed quiet, watching from the sidelines. He smiled for the cameras, said all the right things, "I wish him well." But inside, he was still bleeding. No one from the studio reached out. Not a single message from Craig. Not even an acknowledgement of the man who'd resurrected Bond from near extinction in the 90s. And yet, Casino Royale became a phenomenon. Critics hailed Craig's raw, brutal take on Bond, a stripped-down version of the spy who was more bruised knuckles than tuxedo charm. It made over $616 million and redefined the franchise. For Pierce, it was bittersweet. Bond survived, but it survived without him. He once said it felt like watching someone else raise your child. He hadn't just lost a role, he'd been erased from the future of something he built. And the loss didn't end there. The rejection didn't just sting emotionally, it bled into every corner of his life. His asking price plummeted from $12 million to $3. Projects evaporated. He let go of 12 people from his team. At home, his children saw him cry for the first time. This wasn't just a casting decision, it felt like abandonment. Even in an industry known for betrayal, this was brutal. There should have been more grace, he would later say. More class. In public, he was gracious. He never trashed Daniel Craig, but behind that calm exterior was a man gutted by how quickly loyalty was discarded. To him, Craig became more than a man, he was a symbol, not of malice, but of replacement. Of being pushed aside after carrying a franchise on his back for nearly a decade. The hurt was quiet, but it never really left. And just when you think Hollywood couldn't get crueler, it did. Because what came next wasn't about competition or creative choices. It was uglier. It was personal.